Weather Report were an American jazz fusion band that existed from 1970 to 1986. They were formed by three guys primarily. Joseph Zawinul, who's an Austrian keyboard player, Miroslav Vichush, who was a bassist, a Czech bassist, and Wayne Shorter, who's an American saxophonist who actually appears as a solo artist in this list. He was one of the kind of 1960s stable of American jazz musicians, and it was an interesting move that he made to join this band. They added more. They had some other instrumentalists, particularly percussionists. They added a drummer as well, and interestingly, Wayne, I mentioned before, interesting move that he took, and he didn't lead the band, and he was quite happy to take a back seat quite often in the way the arrangements turned out. They started out as a free improv jazz outfit, and they moved within a few years into jazz funk fusion, and they particularly were known for their use of synthesizers and are thought of as being pioneers of synth in jazz. Okay, they found it hard to hold on to drummers. They went through at one point about a drummer a year. Vitush, I can't pronounce these names, left in late 1973, and they had a few other bassists since then as well, and they had several percussionists come and go. Joe and Wayne, two out of the three founders, stuck it out all the way to the end, but the rest looks very much like a revolving door. Despite all this turmoil, they managed 14 albums, and they were given quite a lot of awards for their music. Hi, my name's Dan. So this was the sixth album by Weather Report, and it's thoroughly after they transitioned from free improv jazz into a more kind of funky mode. But actually, there's still a lot of improvisation going on here. Let's talk through who's involved. I'm not going to name everybody. There's quite a few people involved. There are two bassists. They had a bit of miscommunication, I believe, about whether their bassist had left or not, and then he came back and he did some. There's two drummers, so these are names that I know. So there's Narada Michael Walden, who drummed for other fusion bands around the same time, so Mahavishnu Orchestra and Chick Corea and people like that. You might not know who on earth I'm talking about, and that's no problem. And Chester Thompson, who again drummed for several people, but he ended up after this becoming the tour drummer for Genesis. And the context for that is that because Phil Collins took over the vocals for Genesis, they needed another drummer to go along with them. There are two percussionists on this album. There's no singing. And Wayne Shorter, as well as saxophones, plays the thing called a lyricon, which apparently was probably the first electric flute synth controller. So you could play it like a flute and you could control a synth through it. And of note, there's not a guitar in sight here. I don't call a bass a guitar. And it's collective improvisation. So one of the things that Weather Report did habitually that was different to other stuff that's been labelled as jazz is instead of taking it in turns to solo, whilst the rest of the band were providing an accompaniment to that, is that the ethos was that actually everybody was improvising pretty much all the time. And so it's got a richer texture in that sense. One thing in particular I think this has led to is prominent bass. So I'm a musician occasionally, and my primary instrument is bass, so I always hear the bass and have a great affinity for it. And I do like the bass stuff. The bass work on this album is great. Okay. There's lots of synth sounds going on, and there are. I kind of broadly would classify this as having 3 modes, effectively. There are the funky tracks, so 3 of the tracks are that: Black Market, Gibraltar, and Barbary Coast. There's a couple of tracks I would probably say is kind of soulish, but on the progressive side. So Cannonball and 3 Clowns. And then there's a couple of tracks that are almost kind of just straight out progressive rock, Elegant People and Harandu. And basically that's because the complexity of the chord changes, the rhythms that they're using, and the kind of different sections that they're going into gets very complex, particularly in those 2 tracks. The percussion sound, it gives it a world sound at times. So world music has been cited as one of the things that they're covering here. I wouldn't really call it world music, but I think it gives it a slightly kind of ethnic feel to it. I like it. I would say out of those 3 modes, my favourite is the funky stuff. And then the prog stuff is hard to go wrong with me when you got progressive and complicated stuff going on. And then the more souly stuff, which I feel at times sounds a little bit edging towards the supermarket music. But it's too complicated really for that. Yeah, if I have a criticism, it's that maybe it's a bit too focused on clever rather than on feel. But I think that there's only a little bit, and only at some points would I say that that's a criticism. So I like it. I'd love to know what you think, though. So please let me know in the comments below. That's it from me for now.